Hi, viewers. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Greetings from Toronto. Friends, here we are back with yet another distinguished author, poet, editor, and photographer, Paul Brookes from Britain. I am delighted in welcoming him to the fourth episode of the limited series of literary and critical conversations. On behalf of Setu, I extend a hearty welcome to him. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, Sangeeta.
Setu, the peer-reviewed monthly bilingual journal of arts from Pittsburgh, USA, has taken this initiative to provide a platform to showcase the oeuvre of the accomplished literateurs under this prestigious banner. I take this opportunity to introduce the multifaceted Paul Brookes, who says he lives in a cat house full of teddy bears. Paul Brookes is a shop assistant. He has lived in Wombwell, a township of Barnsley in South Yorkshire for over 20 years. First play performed at the Gulbenkian Theatre, Hull. His chapbooks include debut chapbook, The Fabulous Invention of Barnsley, Dern Community Arts 1993, Collections, A World Where And She Needs That Edge by Nix's Made Press, 2017-2018. They were short stories in verse. The Sperm Bot Blues by Press 2017 is sci-fi poetry. Please Take Change Cyberwit Net 2018 is a shop worker poetry. As Folk Over Yonder by Afterworld Books 2019 is poetry about neighbors. He is the editor of the Wombwell Rainbow Interviews, book reviews, and challenges. Had work broadcast on BBC Radio 3, The Verb, and videos of his self-isolation sonnet sequence featured by Barnsley Museums and Hear My Voice, Barnsley. He also does photography commissions, a poetry collaboration with art worker Jane Corn resulted in Wonderland in Alice, plus Other Ways of Seeing by JC Studio Press 2021. His recent sonnet collections are As Folktale Teller by Impspired 2022, These Random Acts of Wildness by Glasshead Press 2023, Othernesses by JC Studio Press 2023. Recently, his work has been broadcast on BBC Radio Sheffield. He does not believe in competitions, but has been nominated for the Risling Prize and twice for the Pushcart Prize. Recently guest edited for Setu Mag, some British working class poets. More about Brookes's works can be found on the wombwellrainbow.wordpress.com. And now, to give you the taste of his signature, I render one of his short poems we live. Here it goes. In a fake peace between world wars, shop and shop to stay reasonable. Families are killed elsewhere. We see their relatives' tears on plasma screens. Sometimes tears drop closer to home, and we are reminded of our fake comfort. This is preferable, a faux fur covered blade. Sometimes bleeds, and we are keen. That was it. Hope you have got an idea about the wonderful writing he has been practicing, and he says he has been doing that for full 30 years by now. And now let's get down to the business of talking to this featured artist. Hey, Paul.
Hi, Sangeeta.
Yeah. Please share with us something about your background. How was your childhood and youth? Any early influences of your life?
I was born in a little village on the edge of Harrogate in North Yorkshire. We've done a lot of moving around. So we moved to Pontefract in West Yorkshire and then to Barnsley in South Yorkshire, which have vast differences in culture and history and language. Harrogate is very posh, but Starbeck is on the edge of it, and it's famous for its railways, really. So my childhood was in there.
Okay.
I was influenced by a lot of books that my father had and my mother, one of which was Robert Louis Stevenson's The Child's Garden of Verses, especially the poem The Land of Counterpane. So I was always influenced by the fantastic lands and inventions of poets and artists. At the age of 11, I asked for William Blake's collected works, which I got, which is a bit of a doorstep of a book. Also, my dad used to play on his 33 3/4. Oh God. Right. Yeah, he used to play a record of Under Milk Wood, the Richard Burton version, and I used to enjoy it for the bawdiness and the relationships between men and women that it showed, and also illustrating the whole village. Later on in my teenage years, I heard War Music by Christopher Logue on Radio 3, which was very influential. I love the idea of it, of him using modern cinematic techniques of him zooming in and out of the battlefield, the plane of battle, kind of a visual language, what the sound of the shields, the tick-tick, etc. And then later on, for my A-levels, I was doing Samuel Beckett, and I love his use of music, all jokes and silences and pared down language. And we also did Ted Hughes as well, early exploration of animals. And of course, with it being Barnsley, we did Barry Hines' Kes. Again, the blending of the landscape and mining and in industry and the community. And then later on, I joined Barnsley Literary Society, or the late Barnsley Literary Society, because it no longer exists. We had creative writing meetings in a Quaker building. I was featured in their magazine Ilklings, and I also wrote for our local parish magazine briefly as well. So that's a brief overview of my early years.
Of course, these are some very formidable names, and their influence, I can understand how profound it can be. Well, what prompted you to delve into arts? Was it a wish to communicate, or was there some other urge?
Well, first of all, there was my dad's sketchbooks because he used to be an artist before he became a, heating engineer
Mhm.
and then a heating engineer consultant later in his years. But in his early years, before he went into engineering, before he went into the Navy to become a merchant seaman, he used to do sketches because he was born in Mold, because he was a Welshman, born in Mold in Wales, in North Wales. He and a companion of his used to stride the hills with sketchbooks and do some live uh, paintings and sketches of all kinds of things. Cows that were laid down. They had old, fascinating pieces of wood, of parts of a tree that had broken off, and he put all the colours into it that you don't normally see. And his dad was a tool maker, also a bit of a glazier as well. And he did drawings of the shed with all the tools in and that kind of stuff. Also, he used to go around exhibitions and used to sketch some of the masters and paint some of the trying to get the effects of the masters as well. He had some of his work in Mold town council buildings, and won one or two prizes for his art before he went into engineering. So it's that kind of thing, really. Also, at the age of 11-ish, my parents divorced,
Oh.
which I suppose for me as a youngster
Mhm.
was quite harrowing, and that kind of took me into myself. So I had to kind of express it, and the best way I could express it. Also, the arguments previous as well, because they were quite harrowing. The bantering between the both of them as a young child. So I kind of took that into the fantasy things I used to write when I was in school. I used to get some good reports, and I was quite amazed at how well they regarded my writing. With the constant moving about, you also get different schools, different accents. As I said, my Welsh dad, my mum came from Sunderland, so he had the northeast accent as well. And I loved the accent and the different words they were using. And it's like, for example, in Sunderland, the word for food is bait.
Oh,
Whereas in the place where I was, they called food snap. So
totally
there's
different. So,
so a miner would have go to work with his snap box. So but basically it was his lunch box.
mhm.
Whereas in Sunderland or the northeast, they call it a bait box, like they have for fishing. So there was all these different accents and different influences going around. I got a fascination with dialect, a fascination with communities, the different kind of communities, reasons for moving on. And when I was in school, I used to sit. I must have been quite a nerd, really, to be honest. I used to sit on the football line where everybody else was playing football and all this kind of stuff with a big green book and write down my early poetry or early attempts at poetry.
Mhm.
Um, Lots influenced by William Blake and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Tried to copy his styles and do different things. Um, so, and then from then on, it became a kind of habit which I didn't want to lose. And when I wasn't doing it, uh, I didn't feel right. There was something amiss.
Mhm.
But when I started doing it again, everything seemed to go right. I felt a lot better.
Mhm.
So I suppose it could be partly therapeutic, um, and kind of a channel for those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So always on the roll right from childhood. So difficult for kids when the family is breaking. But of course, these varied experiences, they make you richer.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, my late sister gave me some responsibility as well, because I remember my mum coming up the stairs and saying that her and my dad were going to separate. And me, my sister said, I'll go, my sister was 2 years younger than me. And
Okay.
she said, I'll do whatever you do, Paul. So that really left me with a lot of responsibility at that early age. It's responsibility for my sister. It's, so I had to grow up pretty quickly.
So down the memory lane now you are thinking.
Mhm.
Now, to give you a sample of this Renaissance band, I quote one of his compositions, very aptly titled Deliberate Death of a Conformist. Here it goes. I insist, I nod in agreement. I refuse to make a spectacle of myself. I will not protest. I agree with all. The folk in power do. I always obey the law, drive correctly. I want an easy life, no hassle. Why am I guilty? Whatever it is, I did it. They tell me that's too easy. You must have done something worse. If we told you to jump out of that window, would you do it? So I do. Now they arrest me again. You caused a public disturbance. I agree, I say. There must be something you don't agree with, they say. No, I reply. If we tell you you died in that fall and this police station is heaven, I agree. So we see a clever juxtaposition presenting a slice of life here. Hope you all have enjoyed the distinct flavor. Paul, please tell us now something about your recent poetry book, or as you said, you have two recent ones, these random acts of wildness and othernesses. Please let us know
Yes, indeed.
about them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're two collections of sonnets. I was recently introduced by sonnets by Ian Macmillan, who during the pandemic, who and he's a famous local author from Barnsley. He just lives over the valley, really, in a place called Darfield, and he runs BBC Radio 3 The Verb and has done so for years, and he's also a noted performer and poet. And he had this idea of writing sonnets during the pandemic. So I thought, all right, I'll give it a go. And it became it's become a daily habit. It's like learning the piano with 5-finger exercises that you do every day. So I write a sonnet every day. And this is some more collections. I had an earlier collection of these sonnets, but these are the two new ones for this year. And these random acts of wildness, which is that one.
Would you like to
Yeah.
read a poem or two out of this book?
Yes, I can do. Yeah. These were Random Acts of Wildness is published by Glasshead Press, that was started by a Mexborough poet. Mexborough isn't too far away from here, called Ian Parks, who's famous for his love poetry and his political poetry. And he's recently going to come out with the selected poems. And I've done I'm going to be doing an interview with him for the One Well Rainbow. These are in the Random Acts of Wildness. I said to him, in a kind of rough version. expected him to say, "Oh, change this, change that, change the other." He said, "No, no, it's fine as it is." What? I was very gobsmacked, to say the least, that everything was okay for him. I didn't have to change anything at all. So and all this, there's this one, which I say is produced by Glasshead Press, and then there's this one, which is Jane Cornwell's JC Studio Press, and she's also got illustrations by Jane Cornwell in there as well. And she's done the illustration for the front, and she's done the illustration for the front of that one as well, which features an angel, the only white angel that we have in Woolwell Cemetery. Albeit the white angel is not holding the accoutrements for cleaning like a duster, which it is there. It's that's a little joke on the cover from me. So these random acts of wildness starts inside with domestic tasks and then goes outside, and then othernesses goes completely outside altogether, into the wilderness, the lives of animals, and the beach.
Nice.
So what I'll do is I'll read one from this and one from that.
Please
So
go ahead.
I'll start out with my vacuuming. So it takes all domestic tasks and then does it from the perspective of the machine. My vacuuming. I inhale your decay. It spins around inside me. I am your switched-on cleaner. I am designed to clean up your mess mound. My previous body was a breather. My one lung ballooned on inhale, floated, seemed to need to rise upwards, but tight tied to the stick of the handle prevented its escape every time it tried. Now my body has a cylinder waste revolves in, no longer tethered by cable. Battery recharged, you push me in haste over rugs, carpets, and under tables. I wonder what my next body will be. I'm inhaling the spirit of tidy.
Great.
There's a vacuum cleaner for you.
Any other you would like to read? This was wonderful.
Thank you. And then I'm going to read another one from Othernesses, which is which is really the follow-up.
Yeah.
And this is from the point of view. Let's have a look. See if I can get this one. Yes, I'll read the first one, which is about bees, called Sweet Pollen. And as I say, it's illustrated by Jane Cornwell. So she got one marvelous illustration.
Good visuals, yes.
By her. Sweet Pollen. Bigger wing beat gusts me from sweet pollen billows. I must stick to its surface amid buffet and blast. Now heavier, taken away from scented trail back home I skid. Track my trail through vibration pulses. Map. I will dance when home is reached to tell all where sweet pollen will be found. Waggle tap the route after unloading my food haul. As light fades, our head sensors flop. My legs wrap around others. I rehearse my day's forage, retrace my flight. My complex steps mark vibration changes that radiate. Bright warmth lifts our heads from sleep to again find our memory way, avoid harsh rain.
Wonderful. Great.
Thank you.
Well, how has been the general and critical reception of your works?
Generally, the reviews have been very good. Well, I haven't seen a bad one, to be honest. I was quite surprised that it took on the life it has. People seem to get involved in the poetry and involved in the worlds I'm describing, which is a wonderful feeling. it's like the way I used to get involved when I was a youngster into the worlds I was reading about, the fantastic worlds. Used to get fully involved in those, and the rest of everything else just seemed to dissipate, and you were there in a different place. So, and it's nice to have that feeling happen to other people with my own work. So they get involved in the descriptions and in the environments I create.
Mm-hmm.
And so the response has been very good.
Great. So happy to learn about it. I'm sure soon you will broaden the space and more recognition might come your way.
It might do. It might do. I don't go for recognition really. I don't go for prizes or anything like that. I don't believe in them. Prizes to me are pleasant for a few, disappointment to the many.
Yeah,
And
that's
the way I've been brought up, which is kind of like a socialist way, is that I would rather enhance and illuminate the gifts of those that are often neglected and passed over. So that in the Wombwell Rainbow, I accept everyone from the one that's just beginning writing to the one that's very mature in their writing. I deal with everybody the same and give them the same opportunities to promote their creativity. And that's what I believe in.
when you are working hard, it is slowly and steadily. When you are moving ahead, your labor will surely bear fruit. That's our earnest wish for you.
Thank you.
What
Thank you very much.
Yeah?
Thank you.
What does poetry mean to you?
Storytelling, basically. So that and also getting into an alien way of being,
Mm-hmm.
seeing things from other person's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
using the English term, getting into somebody else's shoes, I suppose, and walking in them. Also energy, vitality, laughter, rude, recklessness, showing the edges, the geography of belonging. I always like to include a bit of entertainment to give people a bit of a laugh, even while they've got the serious message underneath. So a lot of the stuff recently it looks perfectly simple on the top, but underneath there's supposed to be things that are worth exploring. So it's worth rereading them again.
Mm-hmm.
And the best poetry to me, I think, like Undermilk Wood, it's the sounds, the wonderful music of the poetry. I'd love for people to see music in my words, in my poetry, because music becomes memorable.
Correct.
And
Mm-hmm.
it stays in the brain longer than just ordinary words.
That's
So
right.
so if my words come across as music,
Mm-hmm.
memorable music at that,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm happy. That's what poetry is to me.
Yes, that's true. I totally agree. Well, what's your view on contemporary poetry? Is it not getting abstract, inward looking, and formalistic these days?
I think that part of it always has been. It's always to do with the likes of Oxford and Cambridge and all the white male poets that get raised up. For example, we got Simon Armitage as the poet laureate. Often, it's because the writers from other cultures have been asked to become poet laureate and refused it, because poet laureate is basically becoming a servant to the state, and they're expressing opinions, saying, well, we're in conflict with the state, with the past history of past racist history, past violent history, past history of genocide, etc. The kind of thing that that the right wing tend to think is not to do with patriotism, but it's looking at the true picture, not an imaginary one. So it always edges towards that white male kind of it. And although we have had a few female ones, but not as many as I think we ought to have. There are a lot of there's a couple of sites that are brilliant on working class poetry, such as Culture Matters and one called Proletarian Poetry, which is run by a marvelous poet called Peter Reynard, who's published a new collection called Manlands about masculinity. And so there are points there. And also there's a wonderful poet called Fran Locke, who's been who's got a job with Cambridge University, so highly academic, but she writes very strong poetry in the modern lingo, and is avidly a promoter of the working class way of looking at things. It's odd for me to look at that, really, because I'm really lower middle class. Because even though, mind you, thinking about it, maybe not. But my mother was always aspirational, so she always wanted to be middle class. I think, coming from a granddad who was a postman, and my grandmother who worked in was a shop assistant in Marks and Spencer's. So she always wanted to better herself. Probably the reason why we kept moving. Mind you, every time we moved, following morning, my mum would have the paper open and be looking at the properties, at the houses for sale. It's like once she'd moved, she wanted to move somewhere else. Crazy. It never settled. But I think that there is a strong sense that there are voices coming through now that are strong working class voices, rather than the ivory towers voices. And there's lots of races and diverse ways of seeing things. They're coming through now as well. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I think it's getting there gradually.
Yeah, there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of flexibility these days. It's modern literature, modern poetry. So
very diverse.
Yeah. I came across a very peculiar poem of yours, Paul, on your website, the Wombwell Rainbow, titled An Inappropriate Life. I would like to read it out for the viewers. Here it goes. Born inappropriate to this inappropriate world, this inappropriate earth, I learned how to be inappropriate. In school, met a lass who said she was inappropriately ready to be inappropriately wet. So we inappropriately married. After 3 months of inappropriate courting, she bore inappropriately our first kid. After 6 months, whilst I worked inappropriately in inappropriate employment, promoted inappropriately to inappropriate manager. So we bought our first inappropriate home, furnished inappropriately. After decorating inappropriately, I had an inappropriate allotment where I grew inappropriate carrots and potatoes and cabbages. She died inappropriately after 7 years inappropriate fighting lung cancer. I never remarried inappropriately. Bring up our second child inappropriately. Tell her inappropriate dream stories of our inappropriate love, inappropriate life. I like this poem because the repetition gives it a strange rhythm, a stylistic device that makes it special, the repetition of the word inappropriate. And I guess it's a summing up of your life too.
Yes, it's also very tongue-in-cheek.
Oh.
Yes, it's that the word is inappropriate is used a lot nowadays. So I like to put things in a different context and
Oh,
take
great.
them as far as possible.
That's a nice way. Satirical.
Yes,
Become satire. Yeah.
yeah. Just taking common expressions or common words. It's that's like a template where I can put different words in and see how it comes out. It's also one of the more humorous ones. So thank you for reading that.
Yeah.
It should make people smile.
Yeah, it stood out while I read all other poems of yours on your website. This was totally different, and so I chose it to be read out here today.
Thank you for doing so.
Please comment on the current landscape of global poetry.
I think it's immensely variegated, diverse mixture of voices. I try to bring as many of those voices into the me blog, The Warmwell Rainbow, as possible, and try and interview people from all over the world, from New Zealand, from Australia, from Mexico, from Spain, all the way through to Canada. Got some of the European writers in there as well. So we tried to get as big and broad a band as possible. I think there's a few Indian writers in there as well. And so increasing the indigenous voices, those of differently labeled neurodivergent LGBT voices are being heard.
True.
And also this emphasis on Instagram poetry and all that kind of stuff. I know it's a lot of it is poo-pooed by stuffier members of the establishment, but it's just another way of expression, to be honest. And it's a different way of expression that's caught on to the public's way of seeing things. So that's why you get a lot of that poetry on bookshelves in the bookshops nowadays, because that poetry sells. And the Instagram poets have found a way to express themselves, and I think that should be hailed rather than criticized. Because the problem with if you've been in poetry for too long, you become old. And the young are seen as adventurous, while the old are seen as rather stuffy and keeping to the traditional ways. But I'm all for this bringing freshness and energy and vitality into it. And if the Instagram poets do that, then that's all the well. Perhaps they could teach us some things about communicating to the public out there, because obviously there's a public need for that kind of expression. So we should be looking towards saying, well, let's have a go ourselves. Let's see if we can do that. I mean, it does sound as though it's like following the crowd, but you try and have an audience or appeal to the audience. And if that's a way of appealing to the audience, like hip hop, so I suppose, hip hop poetry, then you it's worth giving those a try. Even if you don't feel as though it's for you, you should try it a bit and see if you learn anything new. With the poets that I interview and the works that I read that are sent to me, I'd say I'm always for the freshness and the new way of looking at things, and it influences my own writing. It makes it better. It makes it richer, and more varied.
So, who are the most significant voices of this field, according to you?
Well, I would say that there was recently a collection published by a poet called Ank Spice, called The Water Machine. It's like a collection of his poetry, and he has poetry which can be read at various levels. It's easy to read. It also involves you in the natural workings. But he's an LGBT writer, and it also introduces you to those ideas at the same time. Another one similarly is Kushal Podar. Don't know whether I pronounced that correctly, but he's also a very good writer that explores different areas, especially involved with the likes of his family recently. Don Patterson is another one. He's a marvelous sonnet writer, and I love that kind of stuff. Brian Bilston, who's recently been doing his own shows. He started off as a poet on Twitter, supposedly known as a Twitter poet, but he's always inventive in the way he uses words. And again, he appeals to the audience. So he passes over a message in a very humorous manner. To bring in the female side, there's Kim Moore, who's come out with some brilliant work recently. About she came up with a work about husbands that she didn't marry, and that's very adventurous, exploring masculinity and femininity and the relationship between the sexes. So this is very good. There are many more which I could mention, but I don't think we've got time for those. Just keep on going.
Yeah, thanks for letting us know your selection. And now, would you please let us know about the popular concerns of the Womb-Well Rainbow?
Yeah, it's basically awareness day, week, month based. So to have a look at the calendars for the awareness days that are coming up, whether they're to do with natural history, the woodland, the seaside, the ones that the Wildlife Trust brings up, such as the 300. There's a marvelous book published by the Wildlife Trust called 365 Days of Wildness. And I kind of nabbed there with the title "These Random Acts of Wildness." I was glad that it wasn't copyrighted because that's their tag basically. And there's also other prompts to do with the medical side of things, like the mental health awareness. And recently, you also have problems. People that have problems with their heart, etc. And also, I love to promote writers and art workers at every stage of their development, as I said earlier on, whether they're beginners or whether they're established. I have something called the Ekphrastic Challenge, which is every April, which is supposed to be the poetry month. And I bring together 4 art workers who send me 30 pieces of art, which are labeled and numbered for every day of April. And then they're noted for, so last time, this April, we had 4 art workers. So I arranged the 4 artworks, and then I send them out to writers who want to take part, and they write to whatever inspiration, either 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the artworks. Then they send me their responses, and then I print the responses on the day. And that's proved very popular. I did the one in October, based around the idea of Folktober, which is to do with all kinds of myths and legends, which proved quite popular. Basically, with the interviews and catch-ups, exploring the creative growth of writers and art workers without a paywall. So basically, I go onto the Paris, when I first thought about it, I went onto the Paris Review briefly, which nowadays you have to have, which has got a paywall, so you can't get onto any of the interviews. And thought, how can I reduce these fascinating interviews into a kind of condensed version? So I picked out 11 questions to do with folks' creativity. And thought, oh, well, I'll give it a go. So, and I was amazed at the response. On some days, I was publishing 3 interviews a day of responses from writers. So, and it's mounted up until I've got about 1,000 interviews of people from various parts of the world doing all kinds of different genres and writing. I recently expanded that to include art workers as well, and even more so, I've been following the writers that were initially interviewed, and they might have a recent publication. So I basically turned it into a book interview. So now I've got the general interviews and I've got the book interviews. And sometimes they're combined, especially if I haven't interviewed the author before. And so the book interviews are specialist questions on their particular publication that they've had recently into the world. And it's expanding and changing. I'm always looking at new ways of doing it. I've never actually done one of these things before, so it looks quite adventurous, and I like the way you structured it. I could learn a lot from this myself, I think.
You are doing a great service to literature and arts, providing such a high platform to the budding artists so that they can showcase their works, and interviewing them. It's a great service. Yes.
I hope so. I hope so.
And you yourself are so prolific.
Well, as I say, I write every day, so it's some of the stuff works, some of the stuff doesn't, and you just try and get it out there as quickly as possible. I don't like not creating. As I say, it doesn't feel like when I'm not doing it. It's I suppose when you've got a creative kind of mind, to be without it. Mind you, in my job as a shop assistant, all that falls to one side. There's all of the interviews and all of the stuff on the blog is a separate part. It's like compartmentalized differently, so that when I go into being a shop assistant, filling the shelves, dealing with the till, dealing with accidents, helping people with inquiries about where they can find this, where they can find that, what's the price of this, what's the price of that. It's a different kind of thing. It's completely. It's different kind of world. I did write it in my first year. I wrote the collection about shop work, where I was able to remember the tales that were being told to me at the time, and that book was called "Please Take Change," which is that one. It features one of my photos, and that was published.
It has been wonderfully brought out.
It's yeah, and that's basically working poetry. It doesn't get much promotion nowadays, but it is an aspect that I enjoy. Like I say, it's a totally different way of being. It can give everything a bit of a rest, and then you can go back into it again when you finish your shift. So it's nice.
So you have multiple selves in yourself, and switching over to one mode and another. Shop assistant, then writer, then poet, then high quest.
Yeah. Yeah. In actual fact, I do it so well that when somebody asks me about my writing on the till, I have a job to remember. It's like I have to switch and think, how am I going to answer this? And then you're aware of the queue growing. You're thinking, oh no, I'll have to be quick about this. And the ins and outs, eh?
Yes. So friends, I again present to you one of Paul's composition titled Refugee. Refugee is good. To belong is wrong. Be homeless. Mortgages and rents are chains. Tread the world without burden. Find a banquet in a crumb, a glass full in a droplet, warmth in a newspaper blanket. Comfort is a concrete underpass. So short but profound.
Thank you for reading that. Yeah, I was very lucky with that because it was chosen to be in an anthology called Welcome to Britain, which is published by in a city called Leicester, and is available at the moment. I think it's available on Amazon, and they chose that one to be featured, which I was very proud of. I thought it's one of the few political poems that I've had published in print, and I've been pleasantly surprised. I was quite delighted.
Paul, you are engaged in search for the marvelous and mundane, poetry in prose. What are your insights of this search?
Basically, there's poetry in everything, in the most mundane things, like my previous poem about the vacuum cleaner. If you basically, it's putting yourself in the mind, say, of inanimate objects, or even of living things like insects that you would normally pass by or ignore, and it brings you a new view into the world. And sensitively being extra aware, noting possible triggers to such as, especially nowadays, where everybody's aware or extra aware of faux pas that they can make, sometimes inadvertently, sometimes because they disagree. It seems strange, really, because the world is becoming more diverse, but some of the opinions are becoming more extreme. So, and especially in the likes of poetry, which is supposed to be very much sensitive to how the world's working, and having to adapt and having to accept a different way of looking at things. It's I remember when I was a lot younger, before I got married, I was very intrigued as to what women want. So I'll be reading books on on like one's called What Women Want, were written by women, and it presented a completely different aspect. So the courses that they used to take, like awareness of racism and all this kind of stuff, that I used to take when I was trying to be a careers officer, and that opened your eyes as to how things can be perceived, how language can be used and misused and abused. And I think poetry does that. It opens your eyes. And I think it should always be that case. It should always challenge your own beliefs. And challenging your beliefs is a good thing. So you don't get bogged down and set in your ways.
Thank you so much for your insights. We move on to the next. May I know what, according to you, is the main difference between working class literature and mainstream literature in Britain?
Um, well, tongue in cheek, I'd say swearing, because the working class literature does have swear words in it, which can be a bit off-putting to middle class and upper class people. But no, it's talking about the working culture, like mining, shop work, etc. That is much more talked about nowadays. Whereas you get the other poetry, which is about kind of nature and all that kind of stuff. It can be very, although it's quite popular, it can be very forgettable. So I think a more working class literature, some of it is hard to take, but I think that's important as it should be. When everything gets co-opted into the mainstream, it becomes acceptable and comfortable. I think we should always look towards being discomforted. Even though when we go into a room, we look for the comfortable chair. Sometimes the hard chair or difficult chair to sit on would be better for us.
Beautiful analogy. What's the role of place, history, and myth in your writings?
It's very, very important. I remember once reading, I think it was Pablo Neruda, who said that the most important poets have defined place acutely, and especially their locality. And the most important writers write about where they are and the people around them, rather than wider issues. So local culture. So that's why my first collection was called The Fabulous Invention of Barnsley, because all the poetry in there was about Barnsley language, Barnsley place, Barnsley history. And also the creation of myth as well. Because there are, for example, in the mines, you get ghost stories about pits and pit work. Recently, I've been reworking the old poems on being a guard on the pits when the mines when they were closing down in 1982, 1984. And that's talking about the very harsh humor of miners. The South Yorkshire term around here, they call it pillicking, basically, which can be offensive to some folk because it is very, very black humor. For example, I have a poem about a miner that died.
Okay.
While his mate was there, and then his mate tries to get over it. Then he goes back to work, but he gets calls from people like fellow miners that say that they're the ghost of the person that's gone and all that kind of stuff. Basically winding them up. It's basically a kind of humor which says life is hard, but you've got to laugh. So the sooner you laugh, the better.
Yeah.
Also, on a more academic side, at university, I came across a discipline called historiography, which is history writing, which opened my eyes. So it's to see behind the storytelling of history. Why is it being written as it is? Why is it written from that particular perspective and not other perspectives? Why have they decided to tell the tale this way and not another? Later, I read Marina Warner's book, From the Beast to the Blonde, about fairy tales and their tellers. And it's opened my eyes even further to see how tales are adapted for the age in which they're written. So, and then you can take on the tales yourself and decide to write them in your own way in today's language and today's way of looking at things. And again, I suppose I was very influenced by this fantastic worlds, perhaps as a way of escapism of science fiction and fantasy, a different way of looking at ourselves, to get away from your parents arguing and bullies, etc. And also science fiction and fantasy as metaphor, ways of seeing society from the outside, really. So very much.
Yeah, you have enlightened us on varied aspects of literature and working class literature, the mainstream literature, and the place of history, myth in your writings. That's great. It has been a very enriching talk. In the end, may I ask you the message to the young and established writers?
I'd say, well, one key word really, perseverance. Don't give up. No matter what the brickbats you get from, you get a matter of rejection, you get loads and loads of rejection in the beginning. And it's a learning process. It's a craft. And the more you do it, the more you're better at it you get. Hopefully. I'll say don't compare yourself to others, because that's inevitably going to be dispiriting. Trust in your own vision, but don't get deluded. Stay humble and inclusive.
It was pleasure talking to you, Paul. Yours has been a real remarkable journey. Thanks for taking time out of your very busy schedule. Wish you the best for all your future endeavors. Thanks once again. Thanks, viewers. In the next episode, we will be having another important guest with us. Till then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, Paul. Thank you so much.
Bye, Sangeeta.